I will never forget the sound of the cutlery hitting the plates that night. It was Christmas dinner, and while everyone talked about gifts and toasted to the new year, all I could think about was how I had managed to set that table with the little I had. The smell of the turkey blended with the scent of the candles, and amid all that festive air, my daughter Laura, my only daughter, looked at me with a coldness I had never seen in her eyes. She raised her glass and with a smile poisoned by malice said, "Next Christmas, there will be one less mouth to feed, because this old woman will be dead." No one said a word. The silence grew so heavy that even the clock seemed to stop. My grandson, barely 7, lowered his gaze. His father pretended to cough. I continued carving the turkey, trying not to let the trembling in my hands show. I felt a tear fall, but I disguised it as a reflection from the fire. I tried to smile, to keep my composure, though inside something was breaking with a noise only I could hear. All my life I had endured hurtful words, veiled humiliations, silences more cruel than screams. But this was different. It wasn't a slip or a bad moment, it was a sentence. Laura had spoken from a place of deep contempt, from a dark corner of her soul that I, unknowingly, had helped build. As I chewed without tasting, my mind traveled back. I remember the days when she was a child, when she'd sleep wrapped around my neck and tell me she would never leave me alone. I thought about the nights of fever, the torn shoes I fixed again and again, the times I went without eating so she could have a full plate. All of that, an entire life of giving, had been reduced to that cruel line, spoken before everyone, like a macabre toast. I kept eating, pretended I didn't care, pretended I didn't hear, but inside I was burning. And as the lights on the tree flickered before me, I knew something had to change. That night, without her knowing, she had signed the beginning of the end. I ate slowly with a calm that wasn't peace, it was resolve. Every bite was a silent promise. No one imagined that the tired-looking old woman at the table was preparing something. Not just any revenge, but a dignified, cold, calculated response. A lesson Laura would never forget. My son-in-law tried awkwardly to change the subject. He talked about the business accounts, fuel prices, anything that could erase the tension. But Laura just watched me with a half smile, enjoying her own cruelty. When I finished eating, I got up slowly, picked up my plate, and took it to the kitchen. No one stopped me, no one said a word. I washed the plate with slow, mechanical movements. The hot water burned my hands, but the pain kept me awake. I looked at my reflection in the window, wrinkles, gray hair, tired eyes, and I thought of how many times I had been invisible. Invisible in my own house, invisible in her life, invisible even at that table where they spoke about me as if I were already dead. That night, I slept very little, not out of sadness, but clarity. When a woman reaches a certain age, she learns to be quiet not out of fear, but strategy. I knew words were useless now, that love, when unappreciated, becomes dead weight. And I was tired of being everyone's burden. At dawn, the house was silent. I got up before anyone else. I walked down the hallway, looking at the photos on the walls. My wedding, Laura's first birthday, summer vacations. Memories that seemed to belong to another family, not ours. I made coffee, but didn't drink it. There were still leftovers from dinner on the table, crumpled napkins, stained glasses, the stale scent of cold turkey. Yet in the middle of it, my plate was there, clean, shining, waiting. That's when it came to me, not an idea, but a revelation. I picked up that plate, held it like a sacred relic, looked at it and knew it would be my message, my symbol. I didn't need to scream, nor argue, nor beg for love. A gesture would be enough. I went up to my room, opened my deepest drawer, and took out a yellowed piece of paper I had kept for years. On it, I would write what needed to be said, what she needed to read to understand. It wasn't going to be a letter of farewell or resentment, no. It was going to be something far more powerful, a mirror. But before I continue, I'd like to know if you've subscribed to the channel and if you're enjoying the video. Your support helps me know that these stories matter to you. Now, let's continue. That morning, when the clock struck 7, the sun was just starting to filter through the window. I left the folded note carefully on the plate and walked to my daughter's bedroom door. The house was silent. The hallway felt like a never-ending tunnel. I placed the plate in front of her door with the note on top and stared at it for a few seconds. It was like leaving a piece of my soul there, still and waiting to be found. Then I went downstairs, grabbed my coat, and quietly left the house. The morning air hit my face, but it felt like freedom. I walked aimlessly, not looking back. For the first time in many years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt powerful, a cold calm that ran through my entire body. I knew that when Laura woke up and found the plate and the note, it would change everything. Because sometimes mothers take revenge too, not through screaming, but through silences that weigh heavier than iron. I walked through the empty streets, while Christmas lights still flickered from other people's balconies. I heard laughter in the distance, a radio playing, a dog barking. Everything around me continued as usual, but inside me, everything had changed. That night, at that table, the mother who begged for love died. And a new woman, a woman who would teach her daughter what abandonment truly feels like, was born. I kept walking without looking back, holding on to a single thought. She would remember this Christmas for the rest of her life. As I wandered that morning, memories began to fall over me like a fine, unstoppable rain. Every step seemed to pull me back into another time, to the days when all I had was a little girl with big eyes and a heart full of dreams. Laura, my little Laura. How I loved her, how I protected her, how I believed that my love would be enough to ensure she never treated me like a burden. People say a mother forgets the pain of childbirth, but there are other pains that never fade. The day her father died, I was 36. Laura had just turned 6. I remember her tears, her confusion, her fear. I knelt in front of her and promised her that nothing would tear us apart, that I would be her strength, her home, her refuge. And I kept that promise. I worked every job I could find, cleaning houses, sewing, taking care of the elderly. My hands cracked, my eyes dimmed with exhaustion. But she always had food, school, and new shoes when hers were worn out. I never cared about the fatigue. Her smile was all I needed. I loved when she came home from school with a drawing and said, "Look, Mom, it's you and me." In those moments, everything felt worth it. But the years go by, and with them grow the unseen wounds. When Laura became a teenager, something changed. She began to be ashamed of me, my simple clothes, my rough hands, my way of talking. She called me old-fashioned, ignorant. I laughed it off, pretended it didn't hurt, but every word lodged in me like a thorn. The world showed her things I never could. Wealthy friends, brand-name clothing, parties where my presence didn't belong. Slowly, my daughter drifted away. I knew she was slipping from my hands the day she told me not to come to her graduation. She didn't want her friends to see me like this, she said. Such an innocent, cruel sentence. I stayed home, staring out the window in the dress I had sewn just for that day. I cried all night, but by morning, I forced myself to smile. Years later, when she met her husband, I thought she'd finally found stability, a new family, something I could never give. But that man, he filled her head with poison. He made her believe I was just a burden, that she needed to cut the umbilical cord once and for all. I heard him say it one night, thinking I was asleep. Your mother clings to you because she has nothing else. If you don't distance yourself, you'll end up just like her, old and alone. His words haunted me for years. I stayed as far back as I could. When my grandson was born, I thought things would change. I thought that tiny baby would bring us back together, that a grandmother's love might rebuild what was broken. But no, Laura visited rarely, and when she did, everything was tense. Every comment sparked a fight. If I said the child looked thin, she took offense. If I brought food, she rejected it, saying they didn't eat that stuff anymore. Each visit was a silent battle, an unspoken dance of resentment only a mother and daughter know how to perform. Yet I continued to prepare her favorite dessert when she did come. I kept the letters from the bank that arrived at my address. I paid her overdue bills without ever mentioning it. I told myself it was love, but deep down I knew it was also fear. Fear of losing her completely, fear of becoming a ghost in her life. Sometimes I wonder when exactly our bond broke. Was it the day I yelled at her, telling her she was becoming like her father? Proud, cold, unable to apologize? Or was it when I wasn't invited to her wedding? I found out from a neighbor. Imagine the pain of knowing your only daughter married without you there to bless her. I spent that night embroidering a handkerchief with her name on it, as if that could ease anything. I put it away in a drawer. It's still there. I never gave it to her. So, when during that Christmas dinner she told me that next year I wouldn't even be alive, it wasn't just an insult. It was the final chapter of a story that had been falling apart for years. It was as if every time she humiliated me, every tear I cried in silence gathered in her brutal words. But that night something shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I didn't ask why. I only felt a strange calm, as if my heart finally understood it was time to let go. When I left the house that morning, I took only a small bag, my coat, the handkerchief from her wedding, a picture of us at the beach, and a notebook. That notebook was my confession booth, my shelter. In its pages, I had written everything I never said, the letters I never sent, the apologies I never received, the memories that kept me alive. As I walked down that empty road, I thought about returning to my roots, to the town where I was born, to my parents' old house where the smell of earth still lingered, where the ghosts of my childhood still whispered. Maybe there I could think clearly. Maybe there I could decide if my note was to be a goodbye or the beginning of something else. Because no one knew it then, but the note I left by her door wasn't just a piece of paper, not a farewell. It was a key to unlock her conscience, even if I had to break it open. I inhaled deeply, feeling the cold air burn my lungs, and I knew that the past could not be erased, but it could be rewritten. And I was about to begin. Sometimes a single paper weighs more than a stone. That morning, as the sun barely brushed the rooftops, I left my plate and my note in front of Laura's door. No one saw me leave. No one heard the sound of my footsteps on the cold floor. Only I knew what that gesture meant. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a seed of guilt, reflection, or fear. Hours later, as I walked toward the bus terminal, Laura woke up, annoyed because her husband had left the window open. She didn't know the real chill was waiting beyond her door. "What's this?" she muttered sleepily when she saw the empty plate on the floor. Mom's plate, the same one she saw in my hands the night before, was perfectly clean, shining, and on top of it lay a folded note. The paper was creased, with a corner stained by coffee, as if torn from an old notebook. From the bed, her husband grumbled, "Another one of your mother's scenes, Laura." She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the note, on that piece of the past she never expected to find there. Something inside her told her not to read it, but she did. The first lines were written in my trembling handwriting. "Not all deaths happen when the heart stops beating. Some happen in silence, while someone we love looks at us with contempt. Last night, a part of me died, my daughter. But before I disappear completely, I want you to remember one thing. Whoever forgets her mother forgets herself." Laura dropped the note as if it were burning. She pressed her hand against her chest. Her breathing quickened. "What does this mean?" she whispered. Her husband got up, picked up the note, and read it quietly. "She's exaggerating. Your mother is dramatic, you know that." But Laura wasn't listening. That plate, so clean, so carefully placed in front of her door, felt symbolic, unsettling. It reminded her of the dinner, of my silence, of my calm gaze while she stabbed me with her words. For the first time, she felt ashamed. She placed the plate on the dining table. The house smelled like reheated turkey and wilted flowers. No music, no joy, only the echo of my absent footsteps. She went to my room, maybe to make sure I was still there, but when she opened the door, an emptiness struck her like a slap. The bed was made, the closet nearly empty, the mirror covered with a cloth. No notes, no suitcases, no sign of where I had gone. Only the thick air left behind by abandonment. "Mom," she whispered. It was the first time in years she said that word with a trembling voice. She picked up the note again and read it more carefully. At the very bottom, in smaller letters, there was a second line. "When someone cleans a plate, it's not always to use it again. Sometimes it's to leave it ready for someone who truly deserves it." A chill ran through Laura. She didn't fully understand the message, but something in those words made her feel an unbearable sense of loss. She ran to the phone and dialed my number, but it went straight to voicemail. My recorded voice, the one she no longer remembered as gentle, said, "Hello, this is Isabel. If it's important, leave a message. If it's not, silence will be enough." She hung up. Her hands were trembling. Her husband, annoyed, muttered, "She's probably just gone to visit a friend, or back to her hometown. I always told you to set boundaries." She didn't reply. For the first time, she didn't want to listen to him. Something inside her was shifting, a mix of guilt and fear. That note wasn't just a farewell. It was a warning. All day long, she couldn't focus. The plate remained on the table, untouched. At noon, she tried to eat but couldn't swallow a bite. Every now and then, she glanced at the front door, hoping to hear my footsteps, but all she heard was the slow, relentless ticking of the clock. That afternoon, she got in the car and drove to the places I used to go. The neighborhood church, the market, the plaza. No one had seen me. When she returned home that night, exhaustion weighed on her like a stone. She went up to her son's room and watched him sleep. His face had the same peace she had lost years ago. She approached him, stroked his hair, and felt tears well up. "I don't want to become like her," she whispered, without realizing she already had. She walked back downstairs, lit a candle, and read the note again. But this time, something had changed. On the back of the paper, something she hadn't noticed before. There was a blurred stain, like smeared ink. She turned it over and found one last line, barely visible, written in my delicate handwriting. "When you open your eyes and don't find me, you'll understand what it feels like to be alone in your own home." The candle flickered. Laura felt a knot tighten in her throat. "My God, what have I done?" she whispered through sobs. She didn't sleep that night. She wandered through the house in silence, looking at my photos, touching the objects that belonged to me. Everything she had once despised suddenly became precious. The coat she mocked for being outdated, the perfume she called old lady smell, the teacup she swore she'd throw out the day I died. Every one of them now felt like relics of something she might never recover. The next morning, she went to the police station to report my disappearance. But when she mentioned my age and emotional state, the officer simply said, "Older people sometimes leave on their own. If there are no signs of violence, it's best to wait 48 hours. She walked out with a hollow soul. Wait, that's what she was supposed to do. But how do you wait when you don't know if the person you love is still alive? How do you wait knowing that maybe you don't deserve for them to return? Back home, the plate was still there on the table, shiny like a mirror. And in its reflection, she saw her own face, tired, aged, lifeless, and for the first time she understood what I meant. She was dying too. She just didn't know it yet. The silence in the house was crushing. She opened the window, breathed in the cold air, and felt something new. Fear, a deep internal fear, not of the world, but of herself, her words, her history. And while the Christmas lights flickered outside, she realized the note was only the beginning. The real message had yet to reveal itself. The sound of the bus engine felt like a distant roar, as if the city itself was pushing me out of its exhausted body. I sat by the window and watched the streets fade into the background. No one saw me leave. No one asked where I was going. And for the first time in a long while, that loneliness didn't hurt. It freed me. I had a small suitcase, a heavy coat, my journal, and a sealed envelope I still didn't know when I would deliver. The dawn air smelled like distance. As the bus rolled away, my mind kept returning to the note I left on the plate. Not with guilt, but with certainty. I knew she would read it. I knew those words would linger in her mind. And though I didn't intend to hurt her, I knew that sometimes pain is the only way a lesson can be learned. The journey was long, almost 5 hours to my hometown. Everything looked just as I remembered it. Cobblestone streets, red-tiled roofs, the smell of fresh bread from the Ramirez bakery, but everything seemed smaller, quieter. Maybe because I was no longer the same. I stayed in my parents' old house, abandoned for years. Dust coated the walls, the windows were cracked, and the family photos still hung there, yellowed, as if time itself had refused to erase them. As I stepped inside, I felt a sharp ache in my chest, not sadness, but fate. I had returned to the beginning, to the place where everything started. I lit a candle and walked through the empty rooms. Every corner held a memory, where I learned to sew, where my mother taught me to pray, and in that corner where my father told me the only sentence I never forgot. The one who doesn't respect herself becomes a shadow of others. I didn't understand those words then. Now I do. Meanwhile, in the city, Laura was beginning to lose control. I heard later from neighbors who called me. They said she was going door to door, asking if anyone had seen me, eyes red, hair in disarray. She wasn't sleeping, barely eating, repeating over and over. My mother wouldn't do this. She wouldn't leave without saying a word. And they were right. I didn't leave without saying a word. I left her a warning. She just hasn't understood it yet. Days passed in the village, and my life settled into a quiet rhythm. Cleaning, cooking, writing. I wrote a lot about my childhood, about silence, about all the times I swallowed my words out of love, but also about justice, about how a mother can reclaim her dignity without raising her voice. It was my way of healing, of bringing order to the chaos. One afternoon, I found a wooden box hidden under a loose floorboard. Inside were old documents, letters from my parents, property papers, and a will. My hands trembled as I read it. That house and a small savings account I thought was empty, it was all mine. My father had left everything to me. I had never known. I had never claimed it. Suddenly, I understood that destiny had brought me here for a reason. Not just to escape, but to prepare. So I began to plan. Every night, I wrote a new letter. Some were for Laura, others for my grandson. They weren't filled with accusations or bitterness, only truths, confessions, the things I never found the courage to tell her face to face. And among those letters, there was one that was different, one that would change everything. Meanwhile, back in the city, Laura had begun to feel watched. They told me later in hushed voices, as if afraid something supernatural had happened. She claimed she heard my footsteps at night, my voice calling her from the hallway. She dreamed of me, always holding that empty plate. She would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, swearing I was standing by her bed, staring silently. Her husband began to worry. Not about me, of course, but about appearances. People will think you're losing your mind, he warned, but she didn't care. In her eyes, something new was growing. Remorse. Because when a daughter wounds her mother, she can run, she can justify herself, she can invent 1,000 excuses. But guilt always finds its way back home. I continued my days in peace. I woke up early, opened the windows, let the fresh country air seep through. Sometimes the neighbors stopped by, full of curiosity. They asked if I planned to stay, if I was expecting visitors. I just smiled. I owed no one any explanations. One night, while writing by candlelight, I felt it a presence. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. Something told me the story wasn't finished. Laura would come. Sooner or later, guilt would guide her here. And when she arrived, I'd be ready. I closed my journal and looked out the window. The sky was full of stars. I thought of my grandson, his innocent smile, the way he resembled me at his age. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe my legacy didn't have to be only pain. But before I could heal, I had to close the wound his mother had carved into me. Days passed. Each sunrise brought a little more peace. Until one morning, a car stopped in front of my house. I recognized her silhouette instantly. Laura, my daughter. She had arrived. I didn't go downstairs right away. I watched from the window. Her face was hollow. Her hands shook. Her eyes were red and swollen. She was clutching something. My old embroidered handkerchief. The one she never let me give her on her wedding day. Her steps were slow, heavy, like she carried an invisible weight. She knocked 3 times and waited. I took a deep breath. I knew this moment would come, and with it, the beginning of the end. This wasn't the reunion of a mother and daughter. It was the trial of a woman who had finally learned not to apologize for existing. The door creaked as Laura pushed it open. Immediately, the scent of wood and dampness wrapped around her. She stepped inside with caution, as though entering sacred ground. Afternoon light slipped through the cracks, illuminating floating specks of dust like suspended memories. "Mom," she whispered, but no one answered. She walked forward, afraid her footsteps might awaken ghosts. The walls were covered with old photographs, some crooked, some carefully framed. In one of them, my younger self wore a blue dress and held her when she was barely 4. We were smiling, a real smile, from before time erased everything. Laura touched the glass with her fingertips, and a tear fell upon the image. At that very moment, I was watching her from the upstairs window. I hadn't expected her so soon. I thought it would take days for her to work up the courage to find me, but there she was, exhausted, broken. Her arrogance replaced by regret. I didn't go down. I wanted her to walk through the house, to feel the weight of it, to face the memories she had thrown away. She made her way through the hallway. Every room looked frozen in time. The kitchen with its old plates, the rocking chair by the window, the embroidered tablecloth I only used for guests. Everything was familiar, and yet everything was different. When she reached the main bedroom, she stopped. On the bed lay a worn notebook, open to the middle. She picked it up with trembling hands. The first page began in my steady, patient handwriting. "If you're reading this, Laura, it means you finally dared to look back. I don't know if you're here for love, for guilt, or simply out of curiosity. But it doesn't matter. What you're about to read are the things you never let me say." Laura swallowed hard. The following pages were filled with my words, my deepest thoughts, written over years. She turned the pages slowly, reading scattered lines, each one hitting her in the chest like a hammer. There's no deeper wound than raising someone who no longer sees you as a mother, but as a burden. They told me children learn in time, but no one warned me that some daughters only understand when it's already too late. I've forgiven many times without being asked, but forgiveness without repentance is like planting seeds in dry earth. Laura sat at the edge of the bed. Her tears had stopped. Some sentences in the diary were crossed out. Others were scribbled with anger, but one line took her breath away. "This house is not just a refuge. It is my witness. Here I keep what will one day change the course of everything that was taken from me." She shut the diary tight and looked around, searching for any clue to what those words meant. That's when she saw it, a small wooden box under the nightstand, covered by a white cloth. She pulled it out gently. It had a rusted lock and an engraving. "Only when you understand. Open." Laura searched for a key but found none. She glanced back at the diary and noticed something odd, a red ribbon peeking out near the last pages. She tugged it and discovered a sealed letter, stamped with wax. Her full name was written on the envelope, Laura Gutierrez de Ortega. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a page written in blue ink, dated just a week earlier. "Daughter, don't be afraid. If reading this makes it hard to breathe, that is the first sign of life. This box holds the truth you refuse to see. What you called weakness was my way of protecting you. Not everything I gave you was visible, but every sacrifice left a mark. If you choose to open it, you will finally know what you inherited from me. My strength and my decision to never be silent again." The letter slipped from her fingers. Her breath grew shallow, as if the very air in the room had become heavy. She rushed to the window, pulled back the curtains. Outside, the wind was whipping through the trees, and clouds gathered overhead. She began searching the drawers for the key. In the third drawer, she found a small metal crucifix. On its base, engraved in tiny letters, was a single word. She lifted the drawer panel, and there it was, the key, taped underneath, held by brittle old tape. Her heart pounded. She placed the key in the lock, turned it, and the click echoed like thunder. Inside the box were several items. A photograph of me with an unfamiliar man, my face smiling, my hand intertwined with his. Several notarized documents, a bank book, and in the corner, an envelope bearing a logo Laura recognized immediately. A law firm. She picked up the photo, studying my younger face, happy, glowing. On the back, a handwritten sentence. "Your real father loved you until the end." Laura felt the floor shift beneath her. What does this mean?" she whispered, trembling. She rifled through the rest of the papers, finding a will. Her name was there, but so was his. The date was recent. At the bottom, written in firm letters, all property passes to Isabel Gutierrez, who will decide the fate of the assets upon her death. If Isabel does not claim them, they will be transferred to her direct heir, Laura Gutierrez. Laura collapsed to the floor, shaking. The woman she had despised all her life had not only been stronger than she ever imagined, she had also kept a secret that reshaped everything. My silence, she realized, had not been weakness. It was power. From the staircase, I watched her in silence, unseen. I watched her read, cry, caress the pages of my journal as though they were sacred. I saw her break. And though my eyes filled with tears, I didn't go downstairs. Not yet. I wanted her to understand on her own who her mother truly was. Laura clutched the diary to her chest. For the first time in years, she said my name with tenderness. Mom, if you're here, forgive me. A cold gust drifted through the open window, stirring the curtains as if someone had brushed her face. And she swore she heard my voice, soft, somewhere in the room. It's not too late, daughter. But the truth, once it arrives, never waits. The wind howled that morning. Laura hadn't slept. She had been sitting on the floor for hours, surrounded by papers, photos, open letters. The candle she had lit before dawn had burned down completely, leaving streaks of dried wax on the table. Her eyes were swollen, her hair a mess, her breath uneven. Everything she thought she knew about her life had shattered in a single night. The sound of an engine startled her. She looked out the window. A black sedan had stopped in front of the house. A man in a suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. He wore a hat and dark glasses despite the cloudy day. He walked toward the door and knocked 3 times. Laura hesitated, but something inside her, a mix of fear and the need for answers, compelled her to open. Mrs. Laura Gutierrez de Ortega, he asked calmly. Yes, that's me. Who are you? My name is Alejandro Munoz. I'm an attorney. I come on behalf of your mother, Mrs. Isabel Gutierrez. Laura went pale. My mother, she whispered. Where is she? Is she alive? The man observed her for a moment, as if measuring her emotions, then nodded. She is alive, but she requested that I deliver this to you personally. He opened his briefcase and took out a large sealed envelope marked with a blue stamp. Your mother was very clear with her instructions. No one but you is allowed to open this. Laura took the envelope with trembling hands. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and added, She also asked me to stay while you read it, in case you wanted answers. She broke the seal and unfolded the papers. The first document was a recently dated will. The heading read, Last Will and Testament of Isabel Gutierrez. Her eyes moved quickly across the lines. With every sentence, her breathing grew heavier. I, Isabel Gutierrez, of sound mind and memory, declare that all my material possessions, including the property located in the town of San Geronimo, the bank accounts inherited from my parents, and the savings accumulated throughout my life, will be allocated to an educational fund in the name of my grandson, Mateo Ortega Gutierrez. Under no circumstances will these assets pass to my daughter, Laura Gutierrez, until she has proven to the lawyer delivering this letter that she has spent at least 1 year caring for her own son and volunteering with abandoned elderly people. Laura dropped the paper. No, this can't be real, she whispered. She's punishing me. The lawyer remained silent. There were more documents, copies of bank statements, property titles, even a recent deposit made in the grandson's name. Everything was legal. And at the end was a handwritten letter neatly folded in 4, written in my familiar handwriting. Laura opened it with her heart pounding hard. My daughter, if this letter reaches you, it means you now know who your real father was. I didn't tell you earlier because I wanted you to discover it when you were ready to understand that love is not measured by blood, but by action. I know you judged me. I know you hurt me. But I also know that deep inside, the little girl who ran to hug me when she was scared still lives. That little girl didn't die, Laura. She just hid behind your pride. Everything I own, even what I never claimed, I leave to my grandson. Not as punishment to you, but as a warning. Life is not inherited, it is built. If you truly want to recover what you believe is yours, start by returning what you took. respect, tenderness, gratitude. When you are able to love without expecting anything in return, that will be your true inheritance. And when you see an empty plate, remember it's not always a symbol of hunger. Sometimes it is a reminder of all that was given without receiving anything back. Laura pressed the letter to her chest and broke down, not with soft tears, but a deep, soul-wrenching cry. The lawyer watched in silence until she lifted her head. "Where is she?" Laura asked through tears. "Please, I need to see her." Alejandro took a deep breath before answering. "She's here in town, but she asked me not to let you find her until you finished reading this letter. And she wanted me to give you this." He took out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Laura opened it. Inside was a plate. My plate. The same one from Christmas dinner. The one where I left her that note. At the bottom, scratched by hand and still firm, were a few uneven words. "Love that is rejected eventually comes back, cold." Laura held the plate in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "My God," she whispered, "I don't even know how to ask for forgiveness." The lawyer closed his briefcase. "Sometimes, ma'am, forgiveness isn't asked, it's shown." With that, he left without looking back. Laura remained alone, the plate in her hands, the letter on the table, and the sound of wind slipping through the cracks. For the first time, she didn't feel like a mother or a woman or a victim. She felt like a daughter. She stepped outside, looked toward the hills, and screamed my name. Her voice was carried off by the trees, and from far away I heard her. I stood by the old dirt road leading to the mill, watching her with my soul torn between pain and tenderness. I thought, now she is starting to understand, because my revenge was never to take anything away from her. It was to make her see. Dawn arrived wrapped in a gentle mist that covered the hills. The air smelled of damp earth and burning wood. I had spent the entire night awake, a candle burning, my notebook open, without writing a single word. Something inside me whispered that this day would not be like the others, that the story I tried to bury was finally walking toward me on trembling, regretful feet. When I heard a car engine stop in front of the house, I knew it was her. My heart leaped, not out of fear, but destiny. I looked out the window, and there was Laura, stepping out of the car with swollen eyes, a worn piece of paper in her hand. She walked slowly, the way only someone who carries guilt does. She was wearing the same coat she had when she was a teenager, the one I had sewn when we barely had money. She had kept it all these years, and seeing her in it shook me. It was as if the past had come back to ask for one last chance. She knocked 3 timid times, as though she feared waking the memories sleeping inside those walls. "Mom," her voice was barely a whisper. "Are you there?" I hesitated for a moment, not because I didn't want to open, but because I needed to make sure I opened from truth, not from my wound. I stood, took a deep breath, and opened the door. For a moment, there was only silence. We stood there, staring at each other, frozen, measuring the years that had separated us. She was trembling. I thought you were dead," she finally said in a broken voice. "I did die," I replied, "but not in my body. I died the night you stopped seeing me as your mother." Her eyes filled with tears. Without another word, she threw herself into my arms. Her body collapsed against mine, and I felt her warm tears on my neck. For a moment, I wanted to push her away, but I couldn't. After so much time, that embrace echoed what we had both lost, the innocence of loving without conditions. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I didn't know what I was saying. I didn't know what I was doing." "Yes, you did," I replied softly, running my hand through her hair. "You just didn't want to listen. Pride makes us deaf." We stayed in that embrace for a long moment, saying nothing. Outside, the wind was making the leaves dance, and inside, the only sound was her uneven breathing. When she finally pulled away, I noticed her hands were dirty with dust, as if she'd been digging through the past. "I read your diary," she said at last, lowering her gaze. "And the letter. I know about the will and the lawyer." "Then you understand," I answered. "None of this was accidental. Every word, every gesture, every silence had a purpose." Laura nodded slowly. "Yes, I see that now. But what hurts the most isn't what you told me. It's what I forced you to keep silent." She paused. "I found things I never imagined. your strength, your sacrifices, your fears, and I'm ashamed for being so blind. Sometimes daughters need to lose everything to see what they had, I answered gently. Don't punish yourself more than necessary. Just make sure you don't repeat history. Laura took a deep breath and looked straight into my eyes. Why did you do it this way, Mom? Why disappear? Why leave me that note? Why send the lawyer? I smiled sadly, because if I spoke, you wouldn't listen. If I shouted, you'd defend yourself. But if I left silence, its echo would follow you until you were forced to think. And it did. She fell silent, understanding. Then she took something out of her bag. The plate. My plate. She held it in her hands with a respect I had never seen before. I brought it with me, she said. I couldn't leave it behind. I don't know why, but I feel like this plate speaks to me. I looked at it. There was still that slight crack on the rim, the one that appeared years ago. That plate represents everything love can withstand without breaking, I said. Not everything that cracks stops being useful. Sometimes the fractures are proof that we endured. Laura traced the crack with her fingers and nodded. I've been thinking about what you wrote in your letter, about needing to learn to care before I can deserve what I thought was mine. I already spoke to the lawyer. I'm starting volunteer work at the nursing home in town. Will you really do it? I asked, genuinely surprised. Yes, she said, with tears gathering in her eyes. I want to do it. Not for the inheritance. For you. For what I denied you. I looked at her for a long time. There was something different in her face now, humility. A quiet light that only comes from true remorse. Then I said, maybe there's still hope. We sat in the rocking chair on the porch. The sun began to peek through the clouds, painting the sky with golden light. The wind carried the scent of earth and bread. Laura rested her head on my shoulder, just like she did when she was a child. You know, I said finally, I spent years thinking my mission was to teach you to be strong, but I was wrong. My mission was to teach you not to forget. Forget what? She asked. That life, my daughter, is paid for with love or with loneliness. You chose loneliness for a time, but you can still pay with love. She nodded, crying quietly. We stayed like that, watching the sun break through the clouds in a silence that no longer hurt. It was a silence full of peace, full of redemption. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without fearing I would lose her again. Mama, Laura whispered, closing her eyes. If I could go back, I'd do everything differently. You don't need to go back, I told her. You just need to start again. And as the day rose over us, I realized my revenge had fulfilled its purpose. It wasn't punishment, it was a mirror. I didn't make her suffer, I made her see. And watching her awaken was worth more than any apology. I brushed her hair back and smiled. Welcome home, Laura. Weeks passed since that morning when Laura came back into my life. The town had watched us walk side by side down the dusty streets, like two shadows time refused to erase. At first, people whispered, "Is it true? The daughter came back." They say the old woman disinherited her and still forgave her. But with time, the murmurs faded. Routine wrapped around us like a warm blanket, and slowly, silence turned into companionship. Laura stayed at the house, sleeping in her old room, the one where the faded sunflower murals still clung to the wall. Every morning, she brewed coffee and swept the yard. I watched her from the window, hair tied back, expression calm. She was no longer the proud woman who had once humiliated me that Christmas night. She was different, human, hurt but alive. I didn't ask her for explanations. Words are unnecessary once the soul understands. But I watched her quietly as repentance turned into purpose. She talked less, listened more. Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, she'd place fresh flowers next to my parents' portrait. Small gestures, small redemptions. One day, I found her crying over the plate. Yes, that very plate. She was sitting at the table, her head resting on her folded arms, her tears falling on the edge. I stood still, saying nothing. "I can't stop thinking about what I did to you, Mom," she murmured without looking up. "I don't know how to keep living knowing I hurt you so much." "By living," I replied gently, "living differently." She wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. Sometimes the simplest answers are the heaviest ones. That afternoon, She asked me to go with her to the town's nursing home. She had started working there as a volunteer. She told me about it timidly, like someone who isn't sure they deserve a new beginning. It's not easy, she said as we walked. At first, it was hard to look them in the eyes. I thought they were all like you, alone, forgotten, waiting for a visit that never comes. But when I listened to them, I realized each one has a story. And most start the same way. My children don't come anymore. Her words pierced me. And what do you do when they tell you that? I asked. I hold their hand, she replied. And I stay silent because I know there are no words that can heal that. We remained silent the rest of the way. When we arrived, the elderly welcomed us with shy smiles. Some were embroidering, others playing cards. Laura approached a woman with white hair who was knitting with trembling hands. Donna Mercedes, she said. I brought someone I want you to meet. This is my mother. The old woman looked up and smiled softly. So you are the mother who teaches with her soul, she said. Your daughter speaks of you often. I was speechless. It was the first time anyone had called me that, the mother who teaches with her soul. In the days that followed, Laura never stopped working there. I watched her return tired, but with different eyes, clearer eyes. And every night, before bed, she told me about an old woman waiting for letters, a man who cried when he heard a song, a woman who knitted names she no longer remembered. Now I understand, she said one night, sitting next to me on the porch. I understand what you felt when you cared for me without expecting anything in return. It's a love that hurts, yet never stops giving. I smiled. That's what being a mother means, my daughter, giving, even when the plate is empty. Months passed and winter arrived. The cold crept through the cracks. Firewood grew scarce, and my hands began to tremble. My steps slowed. I knew it. My body was starting to say goodbye, not hurriedly, but with the calm serenity that comes from a life fulfilled. One night, while Laura was reading in the living room, I called her. Come, my daughter. She set the book aside and came immediately. What is it, Mom? Are you feeling unwell? I shook my head and pointed to the table. I had prepared something. 2 plates, 2 spoons, and a steaming pot of soup. I want to have dinner with you, I said. Just like that night, yet different. Laura sat across from me. I served the soup slowly, making sure not a single drop spilled. Do you know what I've learned, Mom? She said, looking into my eyes. That an empty plate isn't revenge. It's an invitation. I felt moved. Yes, my daughter, I said. It's an invitation to look, to understand, to remember that while plates can be washed, the soul must be filled carefully. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Outside, rain tapped against the roof like an old song. Then Laura took my hand. Thank you for staying. Thank you for teaching me without shouting. Thank you for waiting for me, even when I didn't deserve it. Don't thank me, I said. Love isn't something to be thanked for, it's something to be nurtured. She stood, walked around the table, and hugged me. I closed my eyes, feeling her warmth, her breath on my neck, her racing heart. I love you, Mom. I love you too, my daughter. And even when time takes me, that love will stay here. I gestured to the plate. In what you gave, and in what you've learned to receive. The following weeks were peaceful. Laura continued caring for me with a devotion I had never known. She read me stories, warmed my feet, brushed my hair with the same tenderness I had shown her as a child. Every gesture spoke louder than words. One afternoon, as she slept in the chair beside my bed, I wrote my final letter. My daughter, if you read this someday and I am no longer here, do not cry. You were not born to grieve, but to live. I never wanted my plate to hurt you. I wanted it to awaken you. Today I need nothing more, because what I truly wanted was not your repentance, but to see you love again. If you achieve that, I will have received the greatest inheritance, your pure heart. I placed the letter inside the plate, covering it with a white handkerchief, and slept. The day I departed, dawn was serene. Laura found me with my face peaceful, hands folded over my chest. At first, there were no tears, only silence. A silence so deep that it seemed to hold all the words we never spoke. Days later, at the funeral, the townspeople filled the small church. Laura spoke before everyone. Her voice was steady, yet gentle. My mother taught me that an empty plate can weigh more than a stone, that you don't need to shout to teach, that sometimes a mother stays silent so her daughter can hear her own heart. At the end, she placed the plate, wrapped in the handkerchief, on the casket. This plate was my punishment, my lesson, and my redemption. I return it full of what she taught me. Love. She cried, but it was a calm, peaceful cry, not one of guilt. Years passed. Laura continued working at the nursing home. Every Christmas, she organized a dinner for all the residents, always placing an empty plate at the center of the table. When asked why, she would smile and say, "Because this plate represents those who gave everything and left silently, and those of us who still have something to learn." The wind continued to blow through San Geronimo. The church bells kept ringing, and the story of Isabel Gutierrez became a local legend. They said her house always smelled of fresh soup, even when empty, and that at night, if one approached the window, they could hear a soft voice saying, "Fill your plate, daughter. Fill it before time takes it from you." And so, generation after generation, that plate continued teaching its lesson. Because there are loves that never die. They simply transform into memory. And there are mothers who, even in silence, continue teaching how to live. Sometimes the deepest wounds are healed not by time, but by forgiveness. Isabel and Laura taught us that it is never too late to love again, even after silence. Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Like if this story touched your heart, and subscribe to the channel to continue sharing more stories full of emotion, reflection, and life. M.